You ever get that gut feeling that your night's about to go to hell? That was me last Thursday, 9:47 p.m., staring at a microwave burrito spinning in slow, greasy circles. It was my night off, which meant absolutely nothing, because when you work in my line of work, unofficial paranormal field ops, unofficial government branch, officially nobody gets a damn. Time off just means wait for the phone to ruin your evening. Sure enough, it rang. Not my personal cell, the work phone. You know the one. Black, clunky, heavier than it needs to be, probably built to survive nuclear fallout. It doesn't ring unless something weird is happening. And unfortunately, weird is my job description. I let it ring twice for appearances. Then I sighed, tossed the burrito back in the freezer, because I knew I'd never eat it now, and picked up. Yeah, Agent Reed? A clipped voice said. No introduction, they never do. We've got something. Nebraska. Remote farm. Details incoming. Click. Always love when the mission brief has less information than a fortune cookie. I tossed on my jacket, grabbed my go bag, flashlight, EMF meter, flask, old rosary, vial of holy water that's mostly vodka now, and hit the road. As I was pulling out of the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. Coordinates, a single line of text. Investigate anomaly. Local witnesses agitated. Livestock missing. Yeah, that sounded about right. The drive was long and flat. Nebraska at night is basically just black sky and the occasional blinking radio tower. The radio started acting up about an hour in. Classic static, like something whispering just below the surface. It's almost comforting now, like an old friend trying to scream at you through a pillow. By the time I reached the farm, it was a little past midnight. The place was silent. No crickets, no wind, not even the buzz of electric lines. Just dead still. Always a good sign. A man stood on the porch of the farmhouse. Late 60s, weathered face, heavy boots, one of those faces that looks like it's been carved out of tree bark. Name was Randall. Said he was the owner. You the feds? He asked. Close enough, I said, flashing my ID. It just says agent in bold letters. Makes things easier that way. Randall didn't say anything else, just nodded toward the back fields. It's in the silo, he muttered. Don't know what it is, but it ain't natural. Yeah, that was becoming a theme. I followed him through the tall grass. His flashlight bobbed in the dark, barely cutting through the thick blackness. Ahead, the grain silo rose like a silver tombstone against the moonlight. The air felt wrong here, like it was pressing down on me, trying to crawl under my skin. Randall stopped 20 feet from the silo. I'm not going closer than this, he said, eyes wide. Not after what it did to the dogs. The dogs? I asked. He didn't answer. I stepped closer, boots crunching over the gravel path. The silo door was hanging slightly open, like someone, or something, had forced it. The metal around the edges looked warped, bent inward, not outward. I took a deep breath, pulled out my flashlight, and stepped inside. Immediately, the smell hit me. Not grain, not dirt, something else, like copper and rot and ozone. My light passed over the interior, empty. At first glance, anyway. But the shadows in the corners moved just a little too slow to be shadows. Then I heard it. A sound like something breathing, but not like any breathing I'd heard before. It was wet. I turned toward the noise. And that's when I saw it. Not clearly, just a glimpse. Something big, pale, the size of a cow, but wrong. Too many limbs, no eyes, skin like wax left out in the sun. It didn't move, it just stood there, breathing, like it was pretending to be asleep. Or pretending to be something else. My flashlight flickered. Once, twice, then went out completely. The breathing stopped. And I swear to God, the silence that followed sounded like it was smiling. There's a particular kind of silence that only exists in moments like this. It's not just the absence of sound. It's like the world itself is holding its breath, waiting to see what you do next. I've only heard it 3 times in my life. Once in a burned-out church in Arizona, once standing on the roof of a flooded hospital in Baton Rouge, and now in a silo full of God knows what, with my flashlight dead and something breathing too close in the dark. I didn't move. That's lesson 1 in this line of work. Don't move until you know what the hell you're dealing with. Also, try not to scream like a tourist. I slipped the EMF reader from my jacket and flipped it on. A soft red light blinked to life. It immediately began ticking like a Geiger counter in a microwave. High readings, off the damn charts. Whatever was in here, it wasn't just physical. It was radiating something. Energy, hate, hunger. The breathing started again, closer now. Sticky, rattling gasps, like a dying animal that didn't know it was supposed to be dead. I backed toward the open door, slow and steady. The reader started screaming. Full tilt. Something moved in the dark, faster this time. I caught a flash of that pale, rubbery skin, and, quick, my flashlight flickered back on. And nothing was there, just a big, empty silo and the faint, impossible echo of breath. I didn't buy it for a second. Right, I muttered. Classic invisible hellbeast protocol. Love that. I left the silo without turning my back on it. Randall was still where I left him, gripping a shotgun like it was the only thing keeping him on this side of sane. You see it? He asked. I saw something. You believe me now? I believed you when I drove through the dead zone of silence and my radio tried to warn me in Latin, I said. What I want is to know when it started. Randall shifted uneasily. About 4 nights ago. My boy Jimmy, he went to check the silo after the dogs wouldn't stop barking. Next morning we found the door open and the dogs, well, what was left? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The look on his face said more than enough. Jimmy still around? I asked. Randall hesitated. Sort of. He nodded toward the house. He came back that night, but something was off. Real quiet. Eyes all black. Wouldn't eat. Wouldn't talk. Then, on the 3rd night, he walked back out to the silo. We ain't seen him since. Harris, goddammit. I've heard this before. In other towns. Other cases. Something ancient crawls out of the dirt and starts whispering to the weak and the grieving. Pretending to be kin. Pretending to be human. I ran a quick thermal scan around the silo. Nothing showed up. Not even residual heat. Whatever was in there didn't register like a living thing. It was like it was borrowing presence, mimicking it. I walked the perimeter of the silo, looking for symbols. There's always something. A summoning, a trap, a warning. Sure enough, on the far side, scrawled low to the ground and almost covered by dirt, was a crude ring of ash and bone. Not fresh, but not old either. You know anything about this? I called to Randall. He walked over, squinting. That's where Jimmy's girl was sitting, night before he went missing. Said she was praying, except I heard her chanting something in a language I sure as hell didn't recognize. I sighed. Let me guess, she's not from around here. Nope. Met her online, one of them witchy types. Figures. I took a sample of the ash and sent it through the mobile lab kit. It came back tagged with traces of burned animal fat, cloves, salt, and moss from a species that doesn't grow on this continent. That's not just spooky, that's intentional. Someone didn't just open a door, they built one. I stood up, brushing off my gloves. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. You stay inside, lock your doors, keep a light on every window, and if you see anyone or anything walking toward your house that you recognize, you don't let them in. What about Jimmy? I met his eyes. That might not be Jimmy anymore. Randall looked like I had punched him. I left him on the porch and walked out into the fields. The silo loomed behind me, quiet now, waiting. I lit a cigarette I didn't need and stared into the night, wondering just how deep this rabbit hole went. That's when my phone buzzed. A new message. I hadn't asked for. Don't look at it when it smiles. No sender, no signal, no chill left in my spine. I stared at the message for a long time. Don't look at it when it smiles. No number, no contact, just those words on my screen. And then, before I could even screenshot it, the message disappeared. Gone, like it had never been there. Like something was playing with the edges of reality now. I flicked my cigarette into the dirt. When you've been in this line of work long enough, you stop trying to convince yourself that reality is fixed. You stop pretending the rules always apply. Because sometimes, just sometimes, something else is writing the rules. And right now, it was writing them in the goddamn silo. I stayed up through the night, parked out in the field with my gear. Baited a perimeter trap, motion sensors, audio spikes, anything I had that might catch whatever was slithering through the cracks. But nothing happened. Until 3:12 a.m. That's when the laughter started. It wasn't loud. It wasn't human either. It was dry and hollow, like someone cracking twigs in their throat. It came in short bursts, interrupted by wet, sucking inhales. Then silence, then more laughter. And the silo door, wide open. I didn't go in. I didn't need to, because something came out. It stepped into the field slow, like it was getting used to having limbs, like it wasn't born walking but had recently learned how. It was tall, gaunt, pale, wearing Jimmy's skin like a Sunday jacket. And its face was almost right. Almost. But the mouth stretched too wide, and the smile didn't stop at the cheeks. It went past the ears, all the way into the dark behind the eyes. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I remembered the message. Don't look at it when it smiles. So I stared at the dirt, at the grass, at the edge of my boot. And the thing in Jimmy's skin laughed again, this time closer. It whispered, "Don't you want to see him again?" The voice was all wrong. It layered syllables like too many cassette tapes played at once. Some words were backwards. Some weren't even words. Then it crouched. I felt its breath on my face. It smelled like hot pennies and mold. I heard it stretch its grin wider, but I didn't look, didn't even blink. Eventually, it stood and walked away. Slow, bare footsteps vanishing into the silo. Once it was gone, I exhaled everything I'd been holding inside. I waited until dawn to move, until the sky turned that pale and different color it always does after a brush with something from beyond. Then I packed up and headed to town. I needed supplies. I needed answers. I needed to not be near that goddamn silo for a few hours. But when I got into the main street, everything was wrong. The local diner was boarded up. The gas station sign was missing its letters, and not a single car was moving. No people, no sound, just the same message spray painted across the post office wall in dripping tar-back letters. Do not look when it smiles. That was yesterday. I haven't seen a single living soul since. The sun came up, but it didn't bring the people back. There are claw marks on the church door, and the grain silo, it's still open, the waiting. And tonight something new happened. I saw Jimmy in my motel bathroom mirror, except the bathroom was empty. And he was still smiling. I left the motel just before midnight. Didn't pack, didn't grab my gear, just my keys and flashlight. Jimmy's smile was still lingering in the corners of the mirror when I shut the door behind me. Whatever that thing was, it knew how to wear faces, and it knew mine now. The streets were empty, as usual. No birds, no wind, not even the buzz of a power line. Like the world had been turned off but somehow kept spinning. I drove without headlights. Didn't need them. The moon was too bright tonight. I parked at the edge of the old cornfield, the silo looming a few yards ahead. It looked taller than I remembered, like it had grown bones in the dark. Its metal sides bulged outward, and something inside was breathing. Slow, heavy breaths, like lungs that had never been human trying to get the rhythm right. I clicked off the engine, and the silence pressed in. I started walking. The corn parted on its own. I didn't bring a gun, not because I didn't believe in using one, but because I didn't think bullets meant much anymore. When you're dealing with something that steals voices, that wears skin, that whispers through grain and silence, you stop trusting metal to keep you safe. You start thinking in rules, and there were only two so far. Don't follow it. Don't look when it smiles. The silo door was open again, just like the last time. But this time, something was waiting inside the threshold. Something that looked like me. Same boots, same jacket, same scar above the eyebrow. Except its mouth was hanging open and its eyes were rolled all the way back. Like a bad wax sculpture melting under a heat lamp. It didn't move, didn't blink. Just stood there like a doorstop made of regret. And behind it, deeper in the silo, something scraped against metal, slowly, deliberately. I stepped forward, and the thing wearing me suddenly smiled. I dropped my eyes to the dirt. The breath hit me again, thick, warm, sickly sweet, like rotten corn syrup and sulfur. It whispered, "You're almost ready." I didn't answer. I didn't move, and stepped aside. Let me pass. Inside the silo, everything smelled wrong. The grain was gone. No corn, no soy. Just dust and husks and something else. Something wet. And in the center, where the silo floor dipped slightly, a hole had opened. A deep, jagged wound in the earth itself. And from that hole, something was growing. I couldn't describe it, not exactly. It looked like roots made of hair, teeth threaded through muscle, bones bending in spirals, trying to shape themselves into a face. It twitched once, like it could hear me. Then it smiled, wide, crooked, and from the shadows above, something began to descend. Not by ladder, not by rope, by choice. It dropped from the ceiling like a spider, made of old skin and broken commandments. Anna whispered in Jimmy's voice, "He left me here. I couldn't move." Not because I was afraid. I mean, I was. But it was deeper than that. It was like the air had thickened into syrup, wrapping itself around my arms and legs. Like the silo wanted me still. The thing that dropped from the ceiling had Jimmy's shape, but it wasn't Jimmy. Too long, too pale, too wet. Its fingers clicked when it moved, like knuckles with teeth. "You left me here?" it said again. But the words didn't come from its mouth. They came from somewhere behind my ears. Like memory. Or guilt. Or both. I tried to speak, but my throat felt full of dust. The kind you only find at the bottom of old seed sacks. The kind that coats your lungs in silence. The thing crawled closer. It didn't blink. "You said you'd come back." I remembered that part. Jimmy had told me to run. Told me to get help. And I did. But no one believed me. No one ever believes a kid talking about a face in the corn. I managed to whisper. I tried. It tilted its head, like it didn't understand language, like it had only ever learned shapes of words, not the weight behind them. Then, in a voice like dry rope fraying, it asked, "Do you want to see what I see?" Behind it, that thing in the pit twitched again. It had eyes now, 4 of them, all blinking out of sync, all mine. I staggered backward, hit the curved wall of the silo. The metal was warm behind me, almost pulsing. The smell of wet earth was stronger now. But it wasn't soil, it was something deeper, like grave mud soaked in engine oil. The Jimmy thing stepped closer. Its feet didn't touch the floor. It hovered, just slightly, toes dragging as if the air beneath it had changed density. "See what I see," It whispered again. "It's waiting for you." I shut my eyes. Tight. Didn't matter. I still saw it. Saw the field the way it really was. Not rows of dead corn, but rows of mouths. Dozens. Hundreds. All half-buried and humming. Chattering. Clicking their broken teeth. They weren't growing grain out here. They were feeding it. I saw something moving beneath the field, shifting the dirt like worms under wet paper. I saw my face. Not once, not twice, over and over, worn by other things, sewn onto them like masks made of regret. The Jimmy thing leaned in close. Its breath was freezing, but its voice was fire. "You were the seed." I opened my eyes, tried to scream, but the silo floor cracked open beneath me, and I fell down, past the roots and bones, past old, rusted tools and bits of spine. I landed in something soft, not dirt, not grain, something that moved when I touched it, and then I heard them, all the voices I'd ever known, calling me from inside. I don't remember hitting the bottom. I don't think there was a bottom, just a slow descent into something soft, warm, and humming, like an animal's breath, like lungs made of loam and rot. I tried to claw my way up, but the walls weren't made of dirt anymore. They pulsed, they shifted, and I realized then I hadn't landed in a hole. I'd been swallowed. Voices whispered all around me. Some I recognized. Mrs. Keller from down the road, old Ben Stroud who went missing during harvest of '98, Jimmy. They whispered like prayer and static, the words blending until they were just sound. An aching rhythmic murmur, like the turn of an old auger blade. I think they were trying to warn me, or welcome me, or both, because whatever was under the silo, it knew me. And I think it had been waiting a long time. I saw memories, but they weren't mine. A barn, burning in the middle of a rainstorm. A calf born with too many eyes, braying under a red harvest moon. Something crawling through a winter field, wearing a man's face like a hood. All strung together in flashes behind my eyelids. All beneath this place. All fed to the thing in the silo. I heard a voice like wet wood splitting. "The field remembers." And another, "And it never forgives a starved harvest." Something moved beside me, not a person, not anymore. It looked like Jimmy, but not the version I knew. This one was bloated, gray, skin like waterlogged paper, and still, it smiled. "I stayed," it gurgled. "You didn't." I didn't know. I choked. The words caught in my throat like grain dust. "You left it hungry." He reached toward me. His hand broke apart into roots. Roots that slithered up my arms, into my mouth, my ears. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to make me grow. I saw the surface again, just for a moment. The silo, its rusted cap. The corn shifting in spirals, like wind moving upward instead of across. Someone was walking toward it, someone in a uniform. A deputy maybe, or a local reporter. I tried to scream, tried to warn them. But the field already had my voice. It echoed up through the soil, sounding nothing like me at all. It sounded inviting. The roots were deeper now. Not in my skin, in my thoughts. I felt myself sinking into something timeless, something with too many eyes and no need for light. And as I slipped into it, as I became part of the field, I understood. The silo was never for storage. It was for feeding, not grain, not corn. Regret, memory, loss. They plant you with guilt, and when it grows, they wear your face. So if you're ever out past dusk, and you see an old silo you swear wasn't there before, with a door that hangs open like a mouth, don't go in. Don't even look too long, because it'll remember you. And if you hear a voice, someone you lost, someone you left behind, calling your name from inside. Run, or don't, it doesn't matter. The field already knows you, and it's hungry.